say it's a great idea to do a festival in Venice, because the best way to understand what was really Venice is to have a look of the history.
I think Venice functions as a sort of filter for emotions, and in a way you're always surrounded by water, so your emotions are heightened by the city.
Just about every state manages to come up with some form of kind of exceptionalism, like why we're so remarkable. Some of those things that in most cases are hyperbole. We don't resemble any other city in the world, are just the literal truth with Venice.
So Venice is a totally exceptional place in the world in a way, because once you think that it's a city entirely constructed, built on water in the middle of nowhere.
Venice was Byzantine at the beginning. It was not Italian, so it was open on the Orient in general.
So first of all, in Venice, there is no aristocracy that is a land-owning aristocracy. Your wealth comes from looking out, from mercantile activities. And really, Venice was one of the great mercantile powers of the world, where so much of what we know from outside of Europe came via Venice. It's always worth thinking that one of the great first descriptions of China of the East is Marco Polo, and Marco Polo, of course, is a Venetian.
Venice acquired its extraordinary wealth partly because of just sheer location and partly because of its great trading pasts.
So Venice sends people out for good and for bad. I mean, in the 13th century, the Venetians are the ones that sack Constantinople on one of the Crusades. So be it sacking, be it mercantile activities, all these objects, all this knowledge are coming back to Venice, and it really does become a great center for creative minds. In a way, it's the first great metropolitan, cosmopolitan city of the world.
Venice becomes the printing capital from a very early time. Venice is kind of almost permanently at war with papal Rome. And I think because the papacy is so intent on suppressing freedom of thought, that Venice, almost by contrast, becomes the great champion of freedom of thought. And you get this quite free intellectual culture, including the most assertive early feminist writing.
In terms of painting, they introduced pigments from the East that they had access to that other cities didn't. So there was always this distinction between Central Italian art, which was based on design, on lines, and Northern Venetian art, which was based on color.
History for Venice is also one of the most rich histories about music. In the Baroque time, they start to experiment and invented this new way to sing.
The birth of the opera, this strange thing, this strange art, was at the beginning a court art. But in Venice, for the very, very first time, they had the idea to open the opera hall to the public. So the public could buy a ticket. The opera changed completely because box office was so important. So the goal was to talk directly to your heart.
When you listen the Vivaldi ario or Monteverdi Madrigale, it is full of fantasy, but it's always melodies that you can easily memorize.
When you think about the artistic output of the city, it's so remarkable. I mean, I always wonder that, when you live in such a sort of constrained place where you feel somewhat trapped in this group of islands, so what do you do? So the fact that Venice has the most incredible festivals makes sense. Carnival was the main one.
The Carnival was a release for people, especially in Venice, because the Carnival lasted 6 months of the year. So half of the year was all these parties, all these concerts.
I always find it amazing that Venice had a festival where the head of the state would throw a ring into the sea to marry the city to the ocean. There was another one where they would build a bridge of barges that would connect an island to another. I mean, they're sort of crazy when you think about it.
It's certainly hard to miss that Venice is both this extraordinarily devout city and also the most Lucian, outrageous city in Europe. It's this particular little sort of microclimate within which modes of behaviour which would be unacceptable throughout most of Europe are miraculously acceptable.
Venice prides itself on the peace that it has as a republic, and it's named already in the Middle Ages from its origins almost the Serenissima, the Most Serene Republic, which is really uninterrupted until Napoleon, until the fall of the Republic, effectively.
Venice genuinely did represent sort of ideals of freedom. And I think it's a world and a tradition that speaks very directly to people today.
The great contributions of Venetian life to the world, in a way, was a sense of magnificence and elegance.
The project is to give perspective of 1,000 years of cultural evolution presented by the power of the music. Venice has a strong power to change our vision of the way to understand the important things of life.